Welcome again to It Doesn't Take a Genius, conversation with introspective perspectives and pithy points of view. Here are your hosts, my friends, Max and Marty.
I think that's Mark and Mike.
Yeah, whatever.
Ramsey!
Oh, Marshall, happy 2-year anniversary. Let me just go ahead and get that right off the bat.
This is a very special episode 104.
Right.
So yeah, 52 weeks times 2 we've been doing this.
Although what's really funny is that it's actually 105 because we had that 2-parter episode back before we realized what we were exactly doing. And anyway, long story there. But we, in honor of we decided episode 100 wasn't quite the capstone we were looking for. So the 2-year anniversary, episode 104 or 5, is the one that we're going to celebrate. And so we've been connected with a gentleman who is near and dear to our hearts. We call this podcast It Doesn't Take a Genius, but this gentleman has literally worked with a wizard. So we have a very natural reason for bringing him on, and he's near and dear to our hearts because he happened to mentor our mentor. So Lynn, could I just give you the floor to introduce yourself to our audience, both members of our audience?
Well, great. Thanks, Mark and Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's a pleasure to be connected to you, knowing how this connection occurred and that you were mentored by a very special person in my life, Dolores Hazel, that I worked with for many, many years. And we have recently connected again, taking her through a significant 15-week executive coaching and certification process around basically the work I've been doing for the past 25 years, and that is teaching and sharing the legacy and the wisdom of Coach John Wooden, who has become my mentor in every aspect of my life. So what a great opportunity to talk about mentoring and the important relationships we have to help ourselves be better people and better at what we do professionally, and delighted to be with you today.
Well, we are so tickled to have you, and honestly, Lynn, we knew of your existence long before this podcast, because Dolores would talk about her time at Sandy Corp and talked about her work there and the important project that you guys cooked up at that time. And if you had not, in a sense, changed her life, she wouldn't have had the chance to change ours. And she really did. Mike and I sat down at a hotel bar and had lunch in, I believe it was November of 2004. Mike, is that right?
I believe that is, yeah.
So that was our first, we called them facilitator learning experiences. We had a T3, as we all know to love in this industry. And at that T3, we met for the first time just off the airplane, sitting at the bar. And within, I think about 3 hours, we had our first meeting with Dolores. So I almost don't want to tell you what she said. I want to sort of paint that picture after you tell us sort of your version of how you connected with Dolores, because I think that this is all going to go back to the timeless principles of Coach Wooden, and you had a chance to sort of do them in the wild. So could you tell us about that?
Well, there's a direct connection. I was at that point a group vice president and a general manager of Sandy Corporation's West Coast business. They were, I would say, a premier consulting, training, and performance improvement firm in Detroit, specializing in the automotive industry. They really helped to invent the industrial training business coming out of the old Jam Handy organization in Detroit. And we had, Sandy really was was kind of an in-house agency to General Motors for many years. And I was part of a process called General Marketing that was trying to get Sandy outside of General Motors, interestingly. And we were able to open some doors like Pitney Bowes and IBM, and then finally got an opportunity to do some business on the West Coast when Sandy got a bid to help invent the Infiniti division of Nissan.
Right.
Acura had launched a year earlier. Lexus had launched 6 months prior, and Infinity was trying to get their luxury division going, and we actually had a chance to help invent them really from scratch, every piece of their business, their customer service strategy, and a very comprehensive training program. I think the most comprehensive in the industry at the time, when we took entire teams of people to Scottsdale, Arizona, and took them through an 8-day program, every job category in the store, plus product and team, and a whole series of things. It was a great program. Now, interestingly, I hadn't met John Wooden yet. And had I had at that time what I spent the next 20 years working on, we'd have been twice as good, I think, at that project. It turned out to be quite an initiative, and I think we were very successful at it. And people like Dolores and I, who was part of our training team and the team that made that whole project come together, it bloomed in the desert, if you will.
Yeah.
Did some incredible work, and she was in charge of a couple of the job categories and the training that went on for those audiences. So we bonded around that project and all the work that we did there, and that started in 1989. So right, 89, 11, that was 33 years ago that she and I started working together. And we're still chatting, still working, still learning, still teaching.
Was she was already at Sandy Corp when the Infinity work?
Okay. Yeah, she was already at Sandy Corporation. She was part of our training team, one of the lead instructors, and facilitators in that process.
And am I correct that you did not hire her?
No, I didn't. No, I did not hire her. She was actually in another department in Detroit, and I actually had been transferred from Detroit to Southern California, which is a whole another story. It absolutely changed the trajectory of our family's life, and to this day, significantly. So I was in California, and then she came out as part of the team that was in Troy, Michigan, and we met and spent the next 5 years in the desert in Scottsdale, trying to invent this car company from scratch.
So I'm really interested about what just sort of happened by osmosis in that sort of the two of you working on a project together, and there's natural mentoring that happened, because I don't know if Mike, I maybe should give you the floor and you could talk about sort of your version of this, but all I remember from that first meeting with Dolores, and it was the team of about maybe 14 of us, would you say, Mike, that first year?
Yeah, there was about 14 of us. Yeah.
Somewhere around there. And there were, retired school teachers, and just all sorts of different interesting people. And some of us knew nothing about the car business. And she just said very simply at the start of the meeting, here's the deal. No surprises. Let's just make it a rule. No surprises. You keep me informed on what's going on, and I will make sure that I protect you if something happens where you've made a mistake, because you're going to, and I'm going to promote you. I'm going to talk you up when there's something that you've done that you can brag on. And some people flourished under that immediately, Mike Marshall being one of them. I was the youngest guy in the whole project at the time, and I was extremely nervous. I couldn't figure out how I had made it through the interview process. And Dolores had to periodically, get a phone call from me where something would happen where I'd say, boy, I better tell her. And every single time that I picked up the phone and called her that first year, she would answer and say, my prodigal son, my son, he's returned. He's returned. Let me help you. What can I do for you? And she would always
had that mothering instinct.
She nurtured me. I was wet behind the ears when I started, and she really built confidence in me, and people like Mike as well. And that's why we're all still friends.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And it's interesting because I remember the exact same thing. Only from the opposite perspective. I think I'm probably, let's just go with I'm older than Dolores. So, yeah. And so the opportunity for someone here that I thought, well, she's, a bit younger than me, but it was obvious from the very first moment that we met her that she possessed the leadership characteristics. She she should have the job that she had, and that we were all going to be better off because she did have that job. And like you said, there was just simple rules. There was it was just these simple maxims, right? No surprises. I will always have your back. And because it was a field job, so we had very little, contact with the main organization. They didn't know us except through our leader, and her admonition that I will make sure to paint you in the best light possible. And with those simple rules, you could go out and work confidently. And you could be the best version of yourself, and you could do the work. And if you had a question, there was this approachableness of, no, there is no silly questions. If you don't ask, I'd be disappointed.
I think Dolores was ahead of her time in the fact that her management style was really one of a coach, and a nurturing coach. There's a lot of chatter today about coaching, and everybody's trying to learn to coach or be a coach, or whether it's a life coach or a leadership coach or whatever kind of coach it is. And it's connected to the development now of cultures, and people are trying to develop coaching cultures. But I think Dolores was way ahead of her time in how she approached things. And then, we really connected. I can't say honestly that I was consciously aware of the fact that I was mentoring Dolores. Honestly, I would say it wasn't intentional. I think I'm being honest and transparent. I don't think it was intentional. We just, we just had great chemistry, similar levels of energy, similar levels of commitment to the idea of what we were doing and how much we believed in it and how much we believed in each other. And I think that brought about a very positive and powerful working relationship. And I loved what she did and how she did it and how she went about it. And apparently she felt similar in some respects. So,
And I think there's a quote by John Wooden, and I don't remember it exactly, but he says something similar, that my life is my message, type of thing. And so while you may not be consciously, mentoring somebody, your example is the path.
Yeah, well, he would describe himself as, I'm just a teacher. I mean, two things come to mind when you say those things about him too. How he described himself, I'm just a teacher. Right. And then the other thing, his quote on how he wanted to be remembered. He just wanted to be remembered as someone who was considerate of others. I mean, that's incredible. With the life he had and what he accomplished, how he wanted to be remembered was someone who was considerate of others. And others to him meant everybody. Those two approaches, Dolores loved to teach and instruct and facilitate and work with people. And she was always very considerate of everybody else's. She was able to read the room, read the situation, read a person's mind and mood. And, she had that great sense to be able to, lock into people and
nailed it.
See them where they are, meet them where they are.
Meet them where they are. That's exactly right. And by the way, she, for what it's worth, she told me that what you provided for her was an example of what to do. She said, I had plenty of managers who taught me what not to do, just based on what their example was. But I remember her, she would periodically have to fly in and observe us. And the first time she flew in, I facilitated a management team meeting, and she observed. And after it was over, she was catching all these things I did well. I had no idea that was going to happen. Somebody was going to tell me things I was doing well. This is amazing. And then the next time she flew in, I bombed. I mean, I absolutely bombed. And her first question was, what do you think you did well? And still, was on that train of, this is to help you, Mark. This is, you're valued. You're useful here. So, and of course, we got into constructive conversations after that of things that I could do better next time. Yeah, but it was
always had a sense of constructive discipline. Coach 100%. Wouldn't define discipline as There was no such thing as negative discipline. You never confuse discipline and punishment. And Coach Wooden said, you discipline to help, to correct, to teach, to improve. Man, what a positive and powerful word discipline is. You help, correct, teach, and improve. Please discipline me, right? Give me a chance to be my best and do my best. And I think that's the kind of atmosphere that I think Dolores always created in the way she worked with people.
I love that.
Oh yeah, and I think one of the things that always struck me was her ability to get people on board with an idea.
Yeah.
And we would laugh because we would, she would share with us, okay, here's this idea I have for our organization, and I've got to go meet with the higher ups and see if I can get them to buy into this idea. And we would just laugh because we knew that the higher ups had no idea what was about to happen to them. They had no idea this idea existed. And when they got done, they would think it was their idea and would be enthusiastic about implementing it.
Yeah.
And just this gift of bringing people on board, making them feel good and included, and then somehow drive forward very purposefully with this is what we need to get done.
Yeah, as you're describing that, I see a conductor. She had the ability to punch the ticket and get them on the train, right? And then get the train down the road, and everybody was happy with the destination when you got there.
Yeah, they're enjoying the train ride, looking at the window. It was, you knew that, they were outmanned.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the connection from the Infinity Project where we came together, that really was the last major thing I did at Sandy. And then they offered me an opportunity to come back to Detroit from California. I actually had, when I left, I had gone through a divorce, and I had a 10-year-old. When I got transferred, I had a 10-year-old living with his mom across Detroit. I lived 15 miles away. So then I was out in California most of the time that he was, going through junior high and high school and all of that. And I literally traveled weekly back and forth from Michigan to California, to stay connected with him. Part of my life story being an abandoned son, I was going to do everything I could to kind of break the curse, 100-year curse we had in our family of fathers walking away from their boys. And so I had to say yes to the job. I didn't have a lot of choice. But at that point, Sandy offered me an opportunity to come back to Michigan. But my son said, he'd been to California a number of times. He said, Dad, if you're coming back just for me, which was really the only reason I was going back, he said, I think I might want to come to California someday. Okay. So I decided, well, I think I'll just start my own business. And we started Urine Marketing Services. That led to an Infinity client who had gone on to Hyundai, opened a very big door there. And then I had an opportunity to get to sell a couple of large projects to Toyota. And one of them was to help launch the university at Toyota. And it was in that process that I built an initial curriculum with them, and John Wooden became part of that. That's how I met Coach Wooden.
That was the connection.
We were developing a program on coaching and decided we'd bring in coaches, film them, trying to figure out how to best think about it. And of course, the first name on the list was the greatest coach of all time. I didn't know him, but I knew somebody who knew him. I got introduced, and the rest is history. We struck up a friendship, did some really great work together. And I eventually took him an idea to create the John R. Wooden course and to build a curriculum and a set of tools around all of his teachings. And that really became then my life work. And I've been doing it now for 20 plus years.
Well, I had missed that part of the story, that there were some clients in between, and through one of those clients, that was really the introduction to Coach Wooden for you.
Yeah.
And so you're really the architect of the certified program.
Well, we invented it from scratch. I invented the idea. I took the idea to John Wooden. I can remember a 3-hour meeting and a 5-page letter that I wrote him trying to give him a vision of what the John R. Wooden course would be all about and how desperately the world needed it and how powerful I thought it was and ultimately what I thought it could accomplish in corporations and schools and things like that. And we had worked together 2.5 years to that point and done some really nice projects together, a number of them in the automotive industry. And so we had a good working relationship. I'd gotten him some really nice fees for the work that we were doing together. You know, he never made more than $32,000 a year as the greatest head coach in college basketball history. And
wow.
You know, I got him more for a speech than he made for a whole year of coaching.
Oh my goodness.
So, you know, it was important. And man, if there was ever a guy that was never about money, it was him. It was almost like he didn't have set fees. If somebody asked him to come and speak, the question he would ask is, do you have a budget? And their budget might be $50,000. Great. He'd love it. He'll take it. They may not have a budget. Oh, that's all right. I think I'd like to do that speech. And he'd come and speak anyhow. So the man, you know, and he once was offered $1 million job by Jack Kent Cooke to come coach the Los Angeles Lakers and a $2 million condo on the ocean in La Jolla. And he turned it down. Turned it down to keep making $32,000 a year and live in a little condo in Encino with his beloved wife.
Wow.
Because he felt that there wasn't anybody at the Lakers that wanted to learn anything he had to teach. He didn't think they were going to play the kind of basketball that he wanted to ultimately teach and coach. And he was a teacher, and the money didn't matter. He thought it just complicated his life, honestly.
Well, and you say the money didn't matter. You got to tell the story of what happened before we pressed record, because Mike often has a background that he puts on his green screen, and he had a portrait of Coach Wooden with a lot of trophies, and you told us a little something about that. Could you share that?
Yeah, I don't know, Mike, whether you can bring that background back up, which might be interesting. But it was a photograph that he absolutely did not like, and he kind of had to be cajoled into taking it. Somebody had pulled all of the trophies that he'd won over a period. There you are, from NCAA trophies to Father of the Year to Coach of the Year. I mean, it represented all of the trophies that he had participated in with his teams and personal accolades he got, and he really didn't like the picture because he felt those weren't the things that really mattered in his life, and those weren't the real trophies in his life. The picture he really loved was a picture of him in his mid-90s, and he's got about 80 of his former players standing around him, and those were the real trophies in his life. And he also thought he had this concept of time that was important to him. I mean, you get a trophy, you know, the night you win the big victory, but he thought the real trophies, the real shining that anyone might do isn't going to happen for another 10 or 15 or 20 years. Right. He was particularly, he particularly liked, there was a coach named Amos Alonzo Stagg, who was a former coach in the early days of football at the University of Chicago. They don't even play it, but at one time they were a powerhouse, and Stagg was one of the great early coaches in the game of football. And a reporter once asked Coach Stagg, well, Coach, how do you think you did this year? And even though that year, I think he'd gone 9-0 and gone undefeated as a football team, his answer was, well, I'm not sure I'll know for another 20 years. What he was saying was, it depends on how these young men turn out and what their life looks like. And that's how he really saw things. So, you know, you win a trophy right after you win the big game, but those trophies tarnish pretty quickly. And
right.
He always thought at some point the world will find a way to trace your trophies. You might ask the question, where are all those trophies now? And how much do they matter to him or to his family? They still have they actually still have most of his NCAAs, but a lot of those trophies, you have no idea where they are, and some of them probably got thrown out. And yeah,
makes me think of Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game. You know, this idea of, you know, we're putting these arbitrary goalposts down and saying at the end of the month we got to have X number on the right. You know, on the board, and why? You know, there are things that have a much longer lasting value. You might even say eternal value.
Absolutely.
On the impact on some of these souls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So what is it about, or what do you believe, looking at today's culture and looking at today's state of leadership, what is one of John Wooden's tenets that just really needs to be highlighted at this point in time in our world?
Well, Mike, when I think of Coach, I think one of the most powerful phrases I ever heard as a description of Coach Wooden was offered by Dick Enberg, the Hall of Fame sports broadcaster, who actually broadcast some of Coach's early games at UCLA. And when Dick Enberg stood up at John Wooden's memorial service and talked about his close friend, the line that he used that was so powerful was that John Wooden's greatness was only exceeded by his goodness.
Okay.
His greatness was only exceeded by his goodness. So the man he was even more meaningful than everything he accomplished and all of the accolades he got for being the greatest coach in sports history. And you can harken back all those years ago. I'm a businessman that grew up in the good to great area, right? Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Well, where did all those great companies go? A lot of them went down the tubes because I don't think there was enough goodness connected to the greatness that these leaders were chasing. And I think that's ultimately, I think, right, the real things are the things that last, and we got to spend a lot more time working on our greatness, on our goodness as leaders, that ultimately will define any level of greatness we're going to achieve. And I think that's what Coach Wooden was really all about. It's one of the things we talk in our book. I think having John Wooden as your mentor, and we'll go back to mentoring. If I could, one message I could deliver to the audience that might say this is, please find a way to begin to study this man and make him your mentor. And you can do that. There's 19 or 20 books. There's a complete curriculum. There's hundreds of videos. Study this man's life. Study every word he said. Study every game he coached. Listen to people who talk about him and how they talk about him. Make him your mentor and get your life on the pyramid of success. It is transformational. It will change your relationships. It will change your business. It will change your perspective. It will change your thinking. And that's what I think I believe he's done for me in the last 25 years. When you were around him, you walked away. I mean, there was a sense of grace and humility and quiet strength about him that was a quiet strength that was thundering in its perspective, if I could put those two things together. And whenever you walked away, you just had this feeling, man, I got to be a better man. I just got to be a better man. How do I get to be a little more like this guy? How do I think like that? And how do I have this listen like he does, and this sense of grace and strength and humility and intelligence and perspective? I mean, he had this wonderful phrase he used called proper perspective. I like to call it common sense, but it was bigger than that. It was somewhere between common sense and proper perspective and true wisdom. I think you've got a description of the way the man thought about things. And primarily because of the way he'd been raised and the values he had and the faith he had.
Well, as you're talking, it makes me think that we probably have, I know some personally, we have leaders that embody many of those traits, but today's culture does not celebrate that. Today's culture does not elevate that, right? It's the tweet, it's the dramatic move, it's the self-aggrandizing behavior that attracts the attention of pop culture.
Yeah.
And so the quiet, humble leader that's looking long term, it just doesn't make for a good headline. But I think you're exactly right. That's exactly what needs to be celebrated.
Yeah. There was no swag in John Wooden's world.
Right.
It's sort of a ball player that would dribble the ball through his legs and then shoot the ball. That guy's likely to be on the bench before the ball touched the floor. Right? He played. He was all about the team, and if the ball was going to touch it, he believed basketball should be a game in which the ball didn't very seldom touch the floor. Right.
Right.
He had this wonderful phrase: "No activity without achievement." Right, that was his definition in industrious. No activity without achievement, and he thinks a lot of the swag, the showboat, all of the stuff again is a lot of activity. Basically, just people calling attention to themselves and taking away from ultimately what the team is trying to accomplish and what the game is ultimately about. And I think it's the same way in business.
Boy.
Oh, yeah. Well, in his case, right, we're in the midst of March Madness, and so it's the NCAA tournament. And for those, for those of our younger viewer who's not familiar with Coach Wooden, when you think of your NCAA championship teams, I believe he won 10 NCAA championships while he was at UCLA in 12 years.
In a 12-year period.
Yeah, I think he won 8 consecutive championships in a row.
7.
All right. So 7
in a row.
Yeah, 7 times he went to the big dance and came home victorious.
7 times in a row, right? 12 times he went to the big dance, 10 times he came back with the trophy, and 7 of those were in a row.
Wow.
Right. And now
there was in that streak, there was an 88-game winning streak, but the other probably remarkable streak, think about this, he won 38 straight tournament games in that stretch. 38 straight, right? We watched one March Madness over the weekend, one game, and he won 38 straight on those.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's so apropos to talk about this now because I think that the most anybody's been able to do since then is four championships.
Coach K has 5.
Coach K has 5, okay. So you can tell I'm not a big
trying to go out on 6. Desperately trying to go out on 6.
Yes. So it kind of puts in perspective, right? So what is the capabilities? What is the power of the system? What is the power of his approach when it comes to not short-term winning, but long-term, like you were talking about, the long-term success of not only the team, but the players?
Yeah. Well, I think so many things there as you lose. I mean, we're describing a lot of end results and a lot of winning, but, and you've heard it said that in his entire coaching career, none of his players ever heard him use the word win or lose. Never. He never talked about winning and he never talked about losing. He was always talking about basically the preparation it took and the effort it took and the commitment it took and the process it took. I mean, we hear a lot of, trust the process. Well, he's the guy that invented that idea, I think, or at least showed how well it can work. And he also, was constantly trying to keep things on even keel. He believed for every emotional peak that you create, you've got, you're going to come down to a low. As an example, this weekend we saw a head basketball coach of a Division I program with his shirt off in front of the TV, and an older man being doused by his players and jumping up and dancing to some wild and crazy. I'm not trying to be a stuffed shirt, but trust me, you'd have never seen Coach John Wooden at round 2 or 3 or 4 in the championship game. As a matter of fact, when they won national championships, he actually instructed his team, I don't want to see from your face and essentially from your emotions, whether we won or whether we lost. I mean, that was how sensitive he was about this idea of the even keel. And he says, don't make a fool out of yourself. Let our alumni do that. Right?
That's perfect.
And everything now is, is all about making a fool of yourself, on public television. And the more you can dance and the more you can sparkle and, the more you can create attention to yourself. And I don't, downsell the energy and the enthusiasm of that, but I think it's a little misplaced enthusiasm, right? And I just, you wouldn't have ever seen the greatest in history with his shirt off in the locker room getting doused by his players, right? He just, that wasn't who he was as a person. And it wasn't proper perspective, and it wasn't how a man of character and integrity and self-control comported himself in a public arena.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember it was I think it was Walter Payton who despised the end zone dance.
Yeah.
And his thought was, you want to go down there, be respectful, and act like you'll be right back.
Yeah, and act like you've been there before, right?
Yeah, this is not a big deal.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Here's the ball, and just that quiet confidence.
Yeah, I like to say, we talk about March Madness. I'm actually doing a podcast with a gentleman tomorrow, and the subject is the pyramid. And I like to really talk about Coach Wooden's life and his teachings and his wisdom can take the madness out of March. As a matter of fact, it can take the madness out of your life every month of the year, because it's such a clear-eyed, high character, under control kind of view of what the important things in life really are and how you go about it. And all those things are really the behaviors you find on Coach Wooden's pyramid of success. And he spent 14 years trying to define what real success is all about, and then spent 14 years building this diagram, and then spent nearly 8 decades living on it. Right? Mm-hmm. He lived essentially on the pyramid of success. Every day it was his template, it was his framework, it was his blueprint, it was his roadmap for how he was going to become his best and how he was going to achieve success as he defined it. And his definition of success, which just has these 4 powerful components, first of all, of peace of mind. His definition of success started with the peace of mind that comes through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you're capable. So peace of mind, self-satisfaction, effort, and capability. When you bring those 4 things together, you've got a chance of achieving the true success that you actually have some control over. Mm-hmm. And how about peace of mind as a goal in the world in which we live today?
Right.
No, very well said. Very well said. So are you familiar with, we didn't talk about this, but are you familiar with Apple TV has a wonderful show, one of the most uplifting shows in the world right now, in Ted Lasso. And the writers of Ted Lasso said their coach character is based upon a Midwestern guy, which we all are, even though you're in California now. Your roots are still there.
Yeah.
And it's a Midwestern guy with that kind of temperament, and the coaching is all based upon the writers based the coaching principles based upon John Wooden's principles. So are you familiar with that? And if so,
I'm very familiar. As a matter of fact, I've had a couple of discussions with Jason Sudeikis' agent.
Okay.
Neat.
Yeah, Jason plays Ted Lasso, and we connected to see if we could be of some help with their writers. I haven't really provided any input there, but all of the things that he's ultimately trying to do, we've been studying and writing about and teaching now for 25 years. We thought we could help him further develop the character and share. We got 25 years of stories and things. And, the pyramid of success shows up in Ted Lasso's office. And if you listen closely, you hear a number of Wooden quotes on a day-to-day basis. Jason Sudeikis was a pretty good basketball player growing up, and his coach was a disciple of Coach Wooden. That's where Jason first heard his John Wooden messages, and that's where he first became familiar with the pyramid of success. So there is some roots and some background there. And Jason's, I think, high school coach was very Wooden-like in terms of his sort of common sense approach and down-home humor. John Wooden was a very funny man. He loved a great story, loved jokes. One of his favorite players, Swen Nader, he allowed Swen to tell a joke every year for 3 years in UCLA just to give Swen a chance to get that stuff off his chest and to bring a little humor to the team. Coach Wooden also had this process for ending every practice he called End on Fun. It's interesting. The greatest shooter in the history of basketball now, right? Steph Curry has exactly the same theory. He ends every practice with a fun exercise where he tries to hit a half court shot and a couple of other things he does just for fun. Well, no matter how difficult or how tough a practice John Wooden ever ran, and he ran the toughest practices of all time when you talk to his players, it was always faster, harder, better, just absolutely laser-like focus to executing the fundamentals, always executing the fundamentals, his definition of skill, properly and quickly. Well, there was no end to the definition of quickly, right? He believed his players, that was their most important skill, and he would rather quickness was actually the first attribute he looked for. Quickness and character were his two hard ones when it came to the kind of players he recruited. So that was Coach's approach.
Oh, that's funny.
That's a topic that I wanted you to sort of talk about is, Coach Wooden would recruit. He would have these players. He was looking for quickness in an athlete. He obviously had a moral fiber, a character component that he was looking for. Maybe coachability, I guess, would be probably thrown into that.
Absolutely.
So there are people listening to this podcast who are thinking about implementing the pyramid, perhaps. And maybe you've got a bunch of folks you've inherited, and they're not all Dolores. They're not all these superstars. So could you speak a little bit about how you go about getting the principles of the pyramid into folks who this may be just completely brand new? This is almost a foreign concept to. Is that even fair to ask of you?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I love the challenge of it. But I think there is, before you begin that, I think there is a mindset for the idea of being a coach that today I think goes beyond the idea of being a good manager or even being a good leader. And I think coaching is a set of skills today that I think involves leadership and it involves management. But you can be a good manager and not be a good coach. You can be a good leader and not be a good coach. But you cannot be a good coach without being a good manager and a good leader.
Ooh, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's this skill set here. And when you think about those day-to-day behaviors, I think you got to see the person before you see anything else. And the question is, how positive is your perspective on what the possibilities and the potential of that person happens to be? I don't care what job they do or how important you think they might be to the team or where you think their career. Have you got a real sense of possibilities for every person? And do you know them enough and well enough and have a quality enough relationship I mean, there's so many people, managing people out there, they have no idea who the people are that they're working with every day.
Yeah.
They don't know what breaks their heart. They don't know what they're aspiring to do. They don't know where they've come from or how they've been influenced or the values that their parents might have instilled in them. So the sense of the person to me is such a powerful perspective. And the more you know, the better the opportunity for creating a relationship around which some really good things can happen, and particularly a relationship that enables you to get through the most difficult challenges. You know, when things are really pushing and things are hard, that's where the quality. So I sort of take, sort of the biblical perspective, God doesn't make any junk.
Right.
And seeing everybody in the light of possibilities. And the question is, are you bringing light into that situation and casting more light on it, which I think was what Coach was able to do, or are you putting a dark cloud over everything and creating anxiety and creating fear and creating trepidation and creating all the things that makes people nervous and tight and afraid and sort of, even as I describe that, you can see how you pull in, right, physically, and how it gets you tight. And Coach believed in trying to stay loose, baby. You got to stay loose. It was quickness under control and being totally loose to be able to execute that. Well, I think the quality of the relationship sets the tone for all that. And then the pyramid just provides this blueprint for every element of behavior around which your work and your life unfold. The work that you have to do every day. Hey, we all have to work, and very few of us are, independently wealthy and are able to go through life without work. And work is a very important part of who we are, how we grow, how we develop, and we're called to work. We're called to be productive. Right. We're called for a purpose. We're called, right, to accomplish things. Hopefully it's a lot more focused on others than ourselves. And that's been, I think, a big part of the lesson I learned from Coach. Probably our real success is going to come in our ability to coach ourselves, but the real joy is going to come from our ability to help others, achieve the things that they want to be able to do. So, I think Coach gives us that blueprint for that quality relationship, and then the behavior that plays out to produce the kind of success every one of us are capable of.
That's powerful.
Yeah,
that's really powerful. We did a segment. I don't want to make us go too long here, Lynn. We want to be respectful of your time, but
hey, I've got all the time you want to take. This is long or short as you want to do it. I'm talking about my favorite subject.
Well, and you're talking about what we love to talk about. So we're loving this, and I'm just thinking we did a couple of podcast series, Mike. We just wrapped up one on if you have a culture that gets both relationship and results. And of course, the trick there is that it's the relationship that leads to the results. And that's what I heard you talking about, is knowing your people, knowing them intimately to where you have that relationship that you can build all these behaviors on top of and achieve success.
Yeah, Mark, the other thing, going back to the mentoring thing where our whole discussion began, we teach in the John Wooden course basically a 5-part process that he had on how he coached. And I think this is a template that everybody can hold on to. And this process began to be described literally in the 1930s when one of his mentors, one of his coaches, his coach at Purdue, wrote a book called Practical Basketball. One of the first textbooks on basketball. Well, John Wooden took that text and he says, everything you learn from somebody else. And he really believed that. And then he wrote his own, the only book he ever wrote by himself. He wrote a book called Practical Modern Basketball. And in the first chapter of that book, he talks basically about his coaching philosophy, which began to describe kind of the 4 key stages of coaching, the 4 steps in the process that he used. We've had a 5th one because of a book he wrote much, much, much later. But he begins to talk about that, being a quality coach basically starts with the quality of your thinking, right? So everything starts with the quality of what's going on in your head, moment to moment, day to day. And if you ask yourself, what are the things that are influencing the quality of your thinking every day? And what are you doing to control what's going into your head? And what are you doing to keep out all the garbage that has the potential to go in your head every day? So it all starts with the quality of your thinking and how he tried to spend a lot of time thinking about thinking. Right? Take time.
Very philosophical.
Take time to think about thinking.
Yeah.
And some pretty smart people, the Bill Gateses of the world, who take a couple hours a day to read good things and to think about their thinking. There's some other examples of that, but I think Coach kind of hit on that first. So everything starts with the quality of your thinking. And if you got bad things going on with your head, that's going to create bad feelings and bad behavior and ultimately bad outcomes. It's the same way on the good side. So it all starts with the quality of your thinking. And then he thought it goes to basically the example that you set. Step one, quality thinking. Step two, set a good example. And he thinks that ultimately is the best teacher, right? The best teacher. Values are basically caught, not taught. So if you want to be a high character leader with integrity and energy and enthusiasm and caring and consideration, and you want to build a culture around those things, well, just set the example for that in every single thing you do and say, and that will get things down the road quicker than anything else. Okay.
You said, a lot of really smart people do that, spend time on their thinking, and coaches talk about mindset. And I'm thinking John Wooden, he was probably reading the book of Romans and thinking about being transformed by the renewing of your mind instead of letting the world form your opinions and so on. So this is pretty timeless stuff, isn't it?
Oh, it's very timeless. He was a man that read his Bible every day.
There we
He
go.
never described himself as a Bible scholar, but he read his Bible a little bit every day.
And it'll change you.
Yeah, it definitely will change you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So this example of, the second part in the coaching model, setting a great example, he had this wonderful little poem that sat on his desk from the day his son was born to literally, I have a replica of it. His family still has it. A little poem that went, a careful man I must be, a little fellow follows me. I do not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the same self way. I cannot once not see his eyes. Whatever he sees me do, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be, this little fellow who follows me. He thinks that I am good and fine, believes in every word of mine. The base in me he must not see, this little fellow who follows me. I must remember as I go through summer sun and winter snow, I am building for the years to be, this little fellow who follows me. And that poem, it sat on his desk, and there's a picture of a little boy following his dad down the beach, and you can see the son walking in his dad's footsteps. So he had that reminder in front of him every day of his life, reminding him of the example that he set. You want your players to be under control? Well, he didn't believe he could get out of control on the bench and expect his players to be under control. Today, right, you got a Division I head coach punching out one of his opposing coaches. What kind of example does that set for his players?
Right.
Just, all about the example you set in self-control. And then the third part of the process, the quality of your thinking, the example you set, how you teach. And first and foremost, he was a teacher, and he has a tremendous body of content on effective teaching methodologies and how he went about it. The fourth part of the process was how you lead. And he thought if you were thinking correctly and you were setting a good example every day and you were doing an effective amount of teaching, you had set up your opportunity to be a good leader. And people are going to follow that kind of person. And then, oh, by the way, leadership goes to then the opportunity to mentor. And that was the fifth part of the process that we added that wasn't in the original book. He wrote a great book with a guy named Don Yeager called Game Plan for Life that is all about mentoring. A mentor is a noun and a verb, something you are and something you do, something you need to have, right? You should be a mentor and you should have mentors. And he had mentors in 4 or 5 categories of his life. He had spiritual mentors. He had leadership mentors. And he had, I think, 7 or 8 people. 2 of them, his father and his wife, Abraham Lincoln and Mother Teresa, and 3 of his coaches were probably the 7 most prominent mentors that he had in his life. So that's why we would say, make John Wooden your mentor. Begin to study him, read everything you can, listen to videos, listen to people who have spent time with him. It will absolutely transform your life.
Wow.
That's amazing. And so if somebody, with no knowledge of Coach Wooden was to begin their journey into exploration, what book would you recommend they start with? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, I think there are, we'll be a little selfish here, but I think there are two books that you start with. One is the one we've most recently developed, which is the last one that's been done, called Coach 'em Way Up. 5 Lessons for Leading the John Wooden Way. And this talks about our 25 years of experience, the pyramid, and it's probably more application oriented than anything that's ever been written in and around and with Coach Wooden. One of the things that we introduce in here is this individual success assessment, and this idea of making your home team the strong team, getting on this journey to goodness and greatness and goodness, right? Coaching yourself first. Promote yourself to be a head coach of your own life. Those are some of the key ideas that's in this. And then I would say just, this would be the other book. It's called Wooden, A Lifetime of Observations and Reflections. To be introduced to Coach and his thinking and his philosophies. This is, we call this the little blue book, the little blue Bible, if you will, on Coach Wooden. It's a great place to start. You could read this to teenagers, or you could read this as a CEO. My original copy that Coach had signed, I can't tell you, I had years of notes in it. And actually somebody walked off with it at a conference. I had it on a table. Interestingly, it was a conference on character and integrity in the financial services world. So I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I'm hoping whoever has it, is putting it to good use.
Right.
Yeah, I hope they read it. I hope they read it every day and think about what they did.
Yeah, those would be the two places. And we actually have 2 websites, the johnrwoodencourse.com.
Yeah.
The johnrwoodencourse.com. And then we have our original website called, and I hope not too confusing, woodencourseproducts.com. We have really 2 worlds. In the last couple of years, we took 20 years of physical content that we put into books and binders and posters and things like that. But in the last 2 years, we've tried to get into the 21st century, put everything into digital formats, make everything downloadable, self-study, those kinds of things. So one website's got all the digital downloading stuff, and the other website has all the physical materials. A lot of people still want a big binder, still like to make notes and carry the books around and those kinds of things. And we've got that, the complete John Wooden curriculum, 4 courses, plus a lot of books and tools and assessments and things like that. So if you're serious about finding a mentor for your life, interesting, we've also been writing, we talk about a process of assessment, development, and sustainment. Assessment, development, and sustainment. And we've written 8 years of weekly curricula around lessons on coaching with Coach Wooden. There's 400 or 500 issues in 2 different products, Wooden 52 and Wooden's Wisdom. So once you start down this road and go on this journey to greatness and goodness, there is work there and content there to sustain every step for years to come.
Lovely. And of course, we'll put links to all of this in our show notes. And thank you so much, Lynn, for just being so gracious with your time to help everybody get great and good. That's really what this is.
And just one final point. Dolores is alive. We were talking about her. We were talking about her in the past tense, like Dolores did this and Dolores was. It's like, no, she's okay. She's still an influence in our life. So,
well, as I said, we very recently have taken both Dolores and Dave, her friend, through a 15-week certification course, and they have become certified John Wooden Way coaches. And that's an opportunity if you want to be involved in this content and teach it and share it, whether in your corporate world or your club or your school or wherever. We can take you through that process and prepare you very powerfully to be a very effective Wooden Way coach.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Lynn. This has been amazing.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it. Anytime. If you're looking for a volume 2 or volume 3, I'm available. We got a lot of content.
Yeah, I feel like this could be the podcast, right? We could just,
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it.
And that's a wrap. It doesn't take a genius. The blog dedicated to reducing the irreducible. Next time, prime numbers. What makes them so special? Join us then, and thanks for listening.
That's good enough.